Okay, so picture this. You've been locked in a muddy, completely devastating stalemate for literally years. Every single inch of ground is costing thousands of lives. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into exactly how the sheer momentum of the American entry completely shifted the balance of power in World War I. If you've ever wondered how a massive global conflict, basically trapped in barbed wire and trenches, suddenly broke wide open, you are absolutely in the right place. We're going to see exactly how American industrial might and a flood of fresh manpower totally turned the tide of the entire war.
So by the dawn of 1917, the European armies had been stuck in this grinding nightmare for years. The British and French forces, they were completely exhausted. Essentially running on fumes after enduring just unimaginable losses. Which sets the stage for our big central question today. How did fresh United States forces completely change the course of what was, up to that point, history's most destructive war? Just think about it for a second. What actually happens when a massive influx of brand new resources hits a battlefield where both sides have absolutely nothing left in the tank?
Now, what's really fascinating here is that before America became this huge deciding factor, the public and the president actually wanted absolutely nothing to do with the conflict. When the Great War broke out in 1914, the U.S. was totally committed to staying out of it. Strict neutrality. President Woodrow Wilson even sent an advisor over to Europe to try and broker a peace agreement. Obviously, that didn't pan out, but Wilson was so dedicated to this neutrality that he literally won his 1916 re-election running on this exact slogan. He kept us out of war. His party was explicitly warning everyone that electing the other guy would drag the nation right into the European bloodbath.
But, as you might guess, that strict neutrality was basically living on borrowed time. Constant German agitation just kept pulling the United States closer to the crossfire. Back in 1915, a German U-boat sank a British passenger cruise liner, the Lusitania. It killed over 1,100 people, including 128 Americans. Germany kind of backed off their unrestricted submarine warfare for a bit after that. But by early 1917, they were desperate to finally defeat Great Britain, so they aggressively started it back up. And then came the absolute final straw. British intelligence intercepted the Zimmermann telegram. In this insanely audacious move, Germany actually reached out to Mexico proposing a secret alliance. They offered to help Mexico take back territory from the US if they declared war on America. So left with absolutely zero options, the United States officially declared war on April 6, 1917.
And even before the official declaration, things were getting really tense back home. Former President Theodore Roosevelt hit the nail on the head when he wrote to a friend that he was, quote, pretty well disgusted with America's super cautious response to the Lusitania sinking. It really shows that while neutrality was the official rulebook for years, there was this growing, very vocal group of Americans who felt that just sitting on the sidelines while getting repeatedly provoked was totally unacceptable. Once those provocations turned into secret telegrams and sunken ships, staying isolated was just completely off the table.
Right, so the U.S. is officially in. And the numbers, they are just staggering. 2 million. To put that into perspective, remember, the Allied forces in Europe are completely drained. Meanwhile, the United States mobilized with a speed that genuinely shocked the world. They essentially materialized a massive, fresh military out of thin air. Congress passed the Selective Service Act of 1917, drafting nearly 3 million Americans. And by November of 1918, they had transported around 2 million fresh troops straight to France. Imagine the psychological and tactical boost that gave the exhausted Allies. It was a literal lifeline of fresh resources pumped directly into the heart of the Western Front.
So the absolutely crucial thing to understand here is that these weren't just a slow trickle of replacements. No, this was an overwhelmingly massive, highly organized army showing up to rescue a front line that was on the verge of total collapse. This main force was called the American Expeditionary Forces, or the AEF, and they were commanded by General John J. Pershing. They didn't just bring gear and guys, they brought this massive, completely renewed sense of momentum to a theater of war that had basically been stuck in trench mud for over 3 years.
Now fast forward to 1918, and this whole situation sets up a terrifying ticking clock scenario for everyone involved. It's essentially a massive race. For Germany, their goal was incredibly desperate but simple. Win the war right now, before this American behemoth can fully mobilize and drop millions of soldiers on their doorstep. They knew their window was slamming shut. On the flip side, the Allies had one job, pure survival. Just hold a defensive line whatever the cost, until those American reinforcements could show up and finally turn the tide.
Because they knew time was completely running out, Germany basically threw a Hail Mary. They launched everything they had left in a massive spring offensive known as Operation Michael. They hurled all their remaining might at the Western Front, trying to just smash through and end the war before the Americans could fully reinforce the lines. And honestly, they came dangerously close. The German forces advanced to within 75 miles of Paris. It really looked like the whole thing might be over. But then, the offensive just miraculously stalled out.
And that is exactly when fresh American units were rushed in to plug the critical gaps, dramatically shifting the momentum right back to the Allies. This happened in 3 really fast, decisive tactical phases. Step 1, late May, the 1st Division of the AIE sees their first combat action against the Germans at Cantigny. Step 2, in July, these fresh American forces helped violently push the Germans back at the Second Battle of the Marne, which officially halted that terrifying spring offensive once and for all. And then, Step 3. By August 8th, capitalizing on this huge wave of new energy, the Allies launched a massive counterattack. This kicked off what we now call the 100 Days Offensive. The fresh forces had officially, finally, broken the long stalemate.
Which brings us to the absolute crescendo of American military involvement. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive. Acting under independent command, General Pershing's forces launched this massive push in late September. And get this, it actually remains the largest battle in United States history. It was just a scale of combat that completely overwhelmed the entrenched German defenses through the sheer unstoppable force of fresh manpower. By late October, the Allies had physically pushed the Germans all the way out of the Argonne Forest, forcing them to retreat behind the Hindenburg Line, which was this heavy defensive barrier they'd spent the previous winter building.
But, while it's super easy to get caught up in all these big macro-level troop movements, we really have to remember that these vast resources were fundamentally made up of extraordinarily brave individuals. People who brought an unmatched energy to a completely exhausted battlefield. Take Sergeant Alvin York, a farmer from Tennessee who led an attack on a machine gun nest and single-handedly captured 132 German soldiers, earning the Medal of Honor. Or Sergeant Henry Johnson, an African-American soldier in the 369th Infantry Regiment. He fought off a brutal night raid while wounded and totally outnumbered, becoming the very first American to receive France's highest military award, the Croix de Guerre. Then there's Corporal Frank Luke Jr., an Arizona-born balloon buster who became the Army's second highest-scoring flying ace and the first airman to ever receive the Medal of Honor. It was these incredible micro-level acts of bravery that really fueled the macro-level victory.
So, realizing they could never ever match this rapidly scaling industrial and human might coming from the US, Germany saw the writing on the wall. They knew military victory was utterly impossible against an unending wave of fresh troops. And so, on November 11, 1918, at exactly 11:11 a.m., the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, the Armistice of Compiègne was signed between Germany and the Allies. And finally, the guns on the Western Front fell silent.
The war was officially wrapped up the following year when the Treaty of Versailles was signed in 1919. The United States had helped secure an Allied victory, totally reshaped the world, and pretty much cemented its own status as a global superpower. But as we finish up this explainer, I want to leave you with a somewhat chilling thought to chew on. A lot of historians point out that the extremely harsh terms forced on Germany by the Treaty of Versailles, combined with their eventual economic collapse, directly paved the way for the rise of totalitarianism later on. It really goes to show that winning a war with military might is one thing, but securing a lasting peace, that's an entirely different and sometimes way more difficult challenge. It makes you wonder, did the political resolution of this incredible victory accidentally plant the seeds for an even darker global future?